A lot of guys think an affair is a free ride. A little thrill on the side to spice up a boring life, right? They think as long as they don't get caught, it's victimless. But life isn't blind. It's a debt collector. And it's been watching you from the shadows, tallying up every single cent you owe. If you like stories that show the raw side of the human heart, hit like and subscribe. Let's get into it. It was a freezing Tuesday night in November. Joe was driving his beat-up Ford F-150, the one with the rattling tailgate, down the winding roads of Eagle Ridge. The rain was turning into sleet, and the heater in his truck was barely keeping up. Joe was just a regular guy, an appliance repairman. He had grease permanently etched into his knuckles and smelled like WD-40 and old coffee. All he wanted was to go back to his cramped two-bedroom apartment where his wife, Mia, was 6 months pregnant. She'd have a pot of chili waiting and a warm smile, no matter how late he worked. Then his phone buzzed. A woman's voice, soft, exhausted, but somehow elegant, said her water heater had burst. The address was in the gated hills, the kind of neighborhood where the driveways are longer than Joe's entire street. He should have said no. But he needed the overtime. When he pulled up to the mansion, he felt like a stain on a white carpet. Everything was too clean, too quiet. He was met at the door by Elena. She was in her 30s, wrapped in a silk charcoal robe, her hair damp from a shower. She smelled like expensive jasmine and sandalwood. It was a sharp contrast to the smell of diesel on Joe's skin. Joe kept his head down, focused on the heater in the basement. It was a simple fix, a faulty igniter. But as he worked, he heard Elena upstairs. She was on the phone, her voice escalating from a whisper to a sob. "When are you coming home? Does the money make up for me rotting in this house alone? I didn't marry a bank account, Mark." Then, the sound of a glass shattering. Joe should have finished the job, taken his check, and left. But when he walked back up, he saw her sitting on the kitchen island, looking small despite the massive house. She looked at Joe not as a repairman, but as a human being. "Do you have a family, Joe?" she asked quietly. "Yeah. A wife. A baby on the way," he mumbled. She gave a bitter laugh. "That's good. At least you're not alone." Then she leaned in. "Can you stay? Just for a drink? I just need to hear a voice that isn't an echo." That was the moment. The line Joe never thought he'd cross. He didn't leave. In the weeks that followed, Joe's life became a blur of guilt and adrenaline. He'd go home to Mia, who would rub his tired shoulders with hands roughened by housework, and then he'd wait for a text from Elena. He was terrified, but he was hooked on the feeling of being more than just a guy who fixed broken stoves. Then, the debt collector arrived. An anonymous text. 3 photos. Joe's truck in Elena's driveway. Joe and Elena through a window. The message was cold: $30,000, or your wife gets the full gallery. Joe's heart stopped. $30,000? That was their entire savings. The new truck fund. The baby's college fund. The blackmailer knew everything. His home address. Mia's doctor appointments. The exact week she was due. Joe spent 3 days in a living hell. He stopped sleeping. He took out predatory loans, drained his accounts, and sold his tools. Finally, he dropped the money at a designated locker and waited for the nightmare to end. The blackmailer vanished. Life went back to normal. Joe stayed away from Eagle Ridge. He stayed home. He watched Mia grow bigger with their child. But Mia had changed. She was quieter now. She didn't ask where he went. She cut her hair short, and the softness in her eyes was replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. Joe lived like a ghost in his own home, terrified to breathe too loud. The truth came out on a sunny afternoon, a year later. Mia's mom had fainted in the kitchen, and Joe had to rush her to the ER. In the chaos, he grabbed Mia's spare debit card to pay the co-pay. When he checked the balance at the ATM to make sure it would go through, the screen hit him like a physical blow. Available balance, $135,000. Joe's head spun. They were a blue-collar family. Where did $135,000 come from? He went to the bank the next day and pulled the records. A week after he was blackmailed, 2 massive deposits hit Mia's account. One for $30,000 and another for $100,000 wired from an anonymous offshore account linked to a high-end law firm in Eagle Ridge. Joe sat in his truck, shaking. He realized then that the shadow watching him wasn't a stranger. It was the woman who made his chili every night. Mia hadn't screamed. She hadn't cried. She had simply watched him ruin himself, then used his guilt to extract every penny he had, and then she'd gone to Elena and sold her silence to the rich woman for 6 figures. When Joe got home, Mia was sitting in the living room, folding the baby's laundry. The house was spotless. The air was thick with the smell of lemon polish. She looked up at him, her eyes as clear as a mountain lake. She didn't say a word. She didn't have to. She had built a cage out of his own sins, and he had walked right into it. Joe still works at that repair shop. He's a good husband now. He never looks at other women. He hands over every paycheck to Mia. He is the most obedient, silent prisoner in America. Because Joe learned the hard way, loyalty isn't always about love. Sometimes, it's just because the price of leaving is more than you can ever afford to pay. Be careful whose hand you hold while you're crossing the street, guys. Some people aren't helping you cross, they're just waiting for the right time to push you into traffic. That's the end of today's story. If this one gave you chills, share it with a friend who needs a reality check. See you in the next one.